everybody, welcome back to the channel where I, Ardell, take you on a journey to capture the vision of my life and hopes to inspire you to do the same thing. If you are new to the channel, hi, welcome. Please remember to subscribe and to click that gray bell to be notified the moment I upload another video every Wednesday on all things ADHD, mental well-being, and personal development. Today, and I always say this, you can obviously tell by the title of this video, we are going to be jumping into the topic of ADHD in girls. For those of you that don't know, I was diagnosed with ADHD about 2 years ago. I was 31 then, I'm 33 now, and you have to have exhibited symptoms of ADHD all the way back to your childhood to be able to be diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. You can't just all of a sudden have some symptoms of ADHD and be diagnosed. Well, according to a doctor, you know your own life, you know what it feels like to be you. Who am I to say? Obviously, this is a disorder that people are still learning about and discovering about, including myself. Discovering about and learning about, is that even the proper way of saying that? Regardless. Anyways, moving on. ADHD is not oftentimes diagnosed in girls, and not because girls have it less than boys. It's just that it exhibits itself or it presents itself differently for girls. Girls are not going to be the cliche stereotype ADHD child. Not that, there's obviously exceptions to the rules, and not that girls can't be hyper, running all over the place and get in trouble all the time like boys are, and climbing on things, so to speak, and running their mouth and having temper tantrums. A girl can be that way and have ADHD. It's just oftentimes that's not how it presents itself. So we're going to be getting into just like a list of things that I looked into on what it looks like for a girl with ADHD. And I'm excited because a lot of these I don't agree with for myself as a kid, and a lot of them I do. So I'm curious what you experienced as a young girl with ADHD. And for the men viewers, I know I've been talking about women and ADHD a lot. If you want me to do a video on ADHD, being a man, and learning about it from a woman's perspective, let me know in the comment section below. And women, let me know what your childlike experience was like. Wow, I can't talk. Let me know what your childhood was like and if you agree or relate to any of what we're going to be getting into. So if I haven't said it already, get a drink, pull up, and let's discuss some ADHD as a girl. Symptom number uno, which I feel like this is just such a cliche ADHD symptom, is that girls, a lot of times when they have ADHD, are chatty Cathy. Now, this is one of the symptoms I do not relate to. I don't feel like I was an overly talkative young girl for the most part. Definitely talked. I just don't feel like I was that kid that was always talking, because I know that it was never me, because there was always a kid that was always talking and I was like, when are they gonna shut up? It was always that kid that got the class in trouble and we all had to be quiet or stop hanging out. I was always good enough to a point where I knew when to behave. So let me know if you relate to this. The complete opposite of being chatty Cathy is that you were reserved or withdrawn as a young girl. I don't feel like this was me, and I feel like I might be an exception to one of these rules, and it's not quite fair because I went to school in all of my elementary school years. If you don't know, I am a twin, and so me and my twin sister had school together, so it kind of gave me somebody to constantly always talk to, and I can completely be myself with, and people got to know us together. And then we weren't always together, so we had our own best friends, but we kind of always just had each other. So I was never really fully withdrawn. But if you don't know my journey yet, my older sister was the one that told me that she thinks I have ADHD because she thinks she has it. She's never sought a diagnosis, but she was very withdrawn as a child. But she was always by herself, very reserved, very to herself, very withdrawn, and didn't have a lot of friends. Now, this next one I completely relate to, and it is the idea of feeling deep frustration or intense irritation at the simplest of tasks, like not being able to complete something. As a young girl, certain things would literally send me over the edge when I couldn't figure something out. We're going to talk about this later, but learning in academics, when I couldn't figure something out, it's not so much a task, but more like an equation in math, I would feel literally deep anger, rage, but I was never an angry kid. So that's what I feel like this symptom is, a deep frustration. I would get so irritated when it felt like everybody else was getting something, but for whatever reason I wasn't. Like, why is it not being explained to me in a way that I get it? But I would never say anything about it, which is why probably that I never got diagnosed or noticed that there was an issue with me, is because I was very quiet about it. I just didn't want anybody to know that I didn't understand or that I was frustrated. I feel like the last one, deeply frustrated by simple tasks, segues into the next one, which is overly emotional, and that 100% was me. Like, I remember as a kid, we got board games for Christmas when I was like 8 or 9 years old from a family member, and I wanted to play, and my dad said that we couldn't or else you'll start to cry. And if I lose, he's like, if you lose, you'll start to cry. And the board game was Risk, but I really wanted to play. And so I begged, and sure enough, he relented and he said we can play. And I was the first one to lose. And sure enough, I ran upstairs and hid and cried because I was the first one to cry. Like, it was just, I was overly emotional, overly fearful. I remember as a little girl, it was in the news that young girls shouldn't get their nails painted, and I started crying, and we were about to paint our nails, and I ruined it for everybody else, where my sisters weren't really scared of the news. I was the one that was overly emotional and cried and ruined it. My mom was like, fine, no nail polish for anybody, and I pretty much ruined the day because of my emotions. Another symptom similar to that is overly sensitive to criticism, which I feel like this is very true. Criticism hurts deeply for me. Like, even still now as an adult, I have to process past criticism. Not too long ago, I mentioned in my last video, I was called out by a friend of mine for having cut them off enough times within, a hangout session to where they didn't say it in a mean way, but they said it in a way that it was evident that I was, I guess, irritating them, or, it was bothersome enough to them. And I feel like they should be able to express their feelings, but that criticism, whether criticism is well-intended or not, it does take me like a moment to be like, don't take it personal. Like, I've worked hard to work past holding on to criticism, but I definitely still am sensitive to it, in the sense that I still feel like a wince of pain anytime there's a criticism. It's not just, I don't think anybody takes criticism just so easily. I think there's definitely exceptions to that rule, but it's painful for me. Like, I don't like to feel like a negative critique on my end, because I'm already so critical of myself. It's more that it's like a validation that, like, yep, you are all those things that you already think that you are, that you already judge yourself for. I'm calling it out, and it's now affirmed, and it's true. And it's like, man, I already beat myself up so much for just who I am in general, that like, to have somebody confirm it really hurts. Another thing that as kids that you might experience as a young girl growing up is anxiety. I don't feel that I was a very anxious kid all the time. I definitely had like anxious moments, and I think I had anxiety about like scary movies or things on TV, but I don't feel like I always was running around with anxiety. But I definitely was a more, straight and narrow kid. I never wanted to get in trouble, but I do feel like there are kids that I've watched growing up that were maybe more anxious as me, but I don't feel like that's something that I had until probably my early 20s was when I started realizing that I do have anxiety, and the feeling of anxiety was more prevalent in my life, and it affected me more than when I was a kid or a teen. So that was an interesting thing to look into, that there, I'm sure, are young girls that are anxious, but I don't feel that that was me. A daydreamer is another symptom that I thought was super accurate towards myself. Definitely caught myself zoning out and daydreaming in class. I think it got worse the older I got, and especially into middle school. I definitely was a daydreamer for a lot of my life, like the span of my life, but I don't think I was as much of a daydreamer as, maybe I'm stereotyping it, but as much as some girls can be. Because I would focus in class and I would want to learn. I think it was if the topic was interesting to me, and I definitely would zone out in math class. Always. Math was just never my strength. I suck at math. Now, the next symptom as a young girl I came across is very accurate, and something I've learned to be better at, but it wasn't a natural gifting for me, I was naturally gifted at it, but I had to learn to not be it, but it's being messy or disorganized. I'm not naturally an organized cleaner. Now I do like when things are clean, and when they're not clean, like I get depressed like recently, but when I was a little girl, me and my siblings, and I'm gonna speak for myself here, I was a hot mess. Like, our room was always a disaster because we shared a room, but even in school when I was a little girl, my desk was a mess. It was like a shove-a-thon, like to try to push things in there, but it wasn't always the worst desk. So I would always compare myself to other kids' little desks and be like, oh, good, I'm not as bad as that. But I was pretty bad. It would always get to a point where I would then have to organize it. So it's like I'd let it get messy, and then eventually I'd have to clean it. Yeah, I was definitely a messy kid. Just very disorganized, and my backpack, like homework would get crunched in my backpack or my folder or whatever. Definitely not very organized. My drawers would be shoved with clothes. Yeah, a hot mess, this one. The next symptom I definitely agree with is forgetfulness. I feel like that's me still to this day. When I was a little girl, definitely forgetful. I don't think it was rampant, but I don't think it wasn't there. I was definitely a forgetful kid. Another symptom for ADHD is time management as a little girl. I mean, time management is kind of hard to gauge as a kid because obviously your parents are the ones that are like prioritizing your life for you. I was not a great student in middle school. I think it was just coming from Los Angeles to St. Louis, the school districts were very different, and the school districts here were more strict. So it was a lot of catching up as well. Once I was in high school, I got a little better at time management and getting my homework and assignments done in time, but not always, which is another symptom, which is that you don't finish your assignments in time and you're late at turning things in, and or you're like the last person finishing a test in class. This wasn't me. I loved school. Freshman year, I discovered my school planner, and I was really good at writing things down, and it really helped me keep organized. And I went from being a 1.6 GPA student to a 3.6 GPA student that next semester. So it was like night and day. And I think I just didn't understand the beauty of organization, and time management is really helped when you write yourself down some tasks to do each day. So I got better at time management the older I got. And when I was a kid, we didn't really have a lot of homework in my elementary school. So it's really hard for me to gauge whether or not I was good or bad at time management. Let me tell you now, I'm not the best at time management. I try really, really hard. And obviously with this video getting uploaded a little later than I want, I'm not always the best. So another thing that we do as little kids, which is a hard time making a decision. I think that this is true more again for me the older I've gotten. When I was a little kid, it was like there wasn't much choice for me. Like I didn't get to choose. I wasn't a spoiled little kid, so it's not like I got a plethora of options. Like choices were made for me, and we didn't really go out to eat all the time. We didn't really go shopping all the time, and I pretty much knew what I wanted at the ice cream truck. If you're a little kid, there was an ice cream truck in your neighborhood. I would always get the same thing, and so I don't feel like I struggled deciding on things as a kid, only because I didn't get much choice. The older I've gotten, again, I've noticed a lot of these symptoms for me, they've came more to fruition the older I've gotten. And maybe that's why girls get, I don't know, maybe it's just the structure of the home or what. But for me, a lot of these things I feel like became more evident the older I got. So another thing that I looked into was trouble learning. And I feel like this is true, but I don't think I was the worst student. But it was true. I had a hard time learning math. And when I was in 6th grade, I remember I was pulled out into like a special reading group because apparently I was behind, even though I didn't know it because I loved to learn. But I think I was like a B- student in elementary. And I was always the best at art. And I remember 3rd grade, I was really good at math. 4th and 5th, I struggled a little bit, but eventually I would catch up. So learning, I don't feel like was a big struggle for me. The one thing that is such a struggle for me, and still to this day, is I'm not a good speller. I vividly remember, again, in 3rd grade, getting kicked out of the spelling bee so early. And I was just like, oh, like I could spell main words, but words that I've even relearned over and over and over, I'll still forget to this day. Social interactions is also an issue that young girls might have. Again, I feel like I am a hard one to talk about this only because I had my twin sister. And because of that, you know, people always wanted to come up to us and ask us questions. And I don't feel like I had a hard time getting friends in elementary school. It was a different story when I moved to the Midwest because I was from a different what is the phrase? I was poor. I was poorer than the other little kids, as Tupac once rapped. So I moved from California, where I fit in. I was probably one of the only white kids, to the Midwest, where everybody, you know, was Caucasian for the most part. Not everybody, but a lot of people had money and I didn't. And it was a hard time fitting in. And that's when my shyness and my socially awkwardness kind of started happening. And I was made fun of more. I never had been made fun of, so I didn't know how to process that. And I went from being completely free to be myself for the most part and not worried about clothes or shoes. Every once in a while I got called out, but it wasn't like everybody was just rolling in the dough in California. But here in Missouri, it was really a stark contrast between my siblings and I, between everybody else. And it was such a drastic change for me and my siblings that it was a lot of catch up to do for us. Like, socially, academically, all that from middle school on. So that's when like anxiety, I think, did start to form. I said it formed in my 20s, but maybe more in my middle and high school years. So I feel like this last one is like so tried and true. I feel like there's so many other symptoms of being a young girl that I'm sure I'm missing, or like, I don't know if there's anything that you feel like was like the quintessential your experience as a young girl with ADHD that I'm not bringing up and you're like waiting for me to bring it up and I haven't brought it up. Let me know in the comments below. As always, I seriously always love hearing from you guys because we learn together and I learn so much, but let me know. But the last symptom of ADHD that I feel like relates to me is we are easily distracted. Would you look at that? Yep. As a little girl, I think it's safe to say I was an easily distracted kid. But I feel like it's more as an adult. I feel like I was more all over the map as a little kid, but it's so excusable because you're a little kid. Kids bounce around, they're hyper, and you know, they don't always stay on track. But more as an adult, my ability to be easily distracted is more evident because it's called out, because you're not expected to act that way as an adult by other adults that don't have ADHD or don't realize that you can still have ADHD or that it's an adult diagnosable disorder. But yeah, as a young girl, being easily distracted, or maybe I was and I just don't remember. But I definitely know that for me as a little girl, I was a good student to the best of my ability. I would talk a lot to the point where I wasn't noticed. I was able to evade teachers noticing my academic abilities by basically just staying quiet until I kind of figured it out on my own. I'd always figure it out later, or not at all, or kind of skate by. In middle school and high school, it was the same problem. It was a lot of catching up. I was a really bad student, middle and early high school. And eventually I learned how to structure my life through a scheduling notebook and writing my assignments down. And something within myself and praying to God, I was able to go from a DFC student to an AB student, and all through just structuring my life and staying focused and intentionally wanting to be a better student. Because I knew I wasn't dumb. I just knew I could do better. I knew I wasn't dumb. So I just decided to focus. I just cared about school a little bit more, but you can't always force kids with ADHD to care about school more, and it might be a little harder for those students to get better grades and to be a more focused, less distracted kid. But I cared about what I was learning about, and I think that the teacher makes a big difference, and awareness in ADHD would make a big difference for teachers. And I feel like a lot of those resources I've heard have gotten better for kids these days. I could be wrong, I don't know, but I have a friend that had kids with ADHD, and there's just a little bit more help that I feel like might go into academics for kids. But I was just able to be ignored. Like, I just kind of made it through school without anybody really noticing me or flagging me down as ADHD. I think my mother said before she passed away, she's like, I think after watching your videos, I had ADHD, which makes a lot of sense. And so I think that's why she wasn't able to notice that I had ADHD, because she had it herself and she was trying to process life and go through life with 3 young teens, and you know, she was going through a lot when I was going through a lot. So I don't know, it's interesting to reflect back on my little girl years and to look into these symptoms, and it makes sense that I wasn't noticed as having ADHD, and it definitely makes sense that I grew into eventually needing a diagnosis, because something something was amiss. Something was awry, and I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out why. Me and my cool dad jokes. So that is my video for y'all today. I hope you learned a thing or two about a thing or two, and let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. You know, I always love to hear from you. I've said that about 1,000 times by now. But yeah, if you haven't already, please join the family of visionaries and subscribe to my channel. Click that gray bell to be notified the moment I upload another video every Wednesday, hopefully, because sometimes I get distracted and forgetful and time management is an issue. But yeah, so new videos every Wednesday on ADHD, mental well-being, and personal development. And y'all must know by now, you are in my prayers, and Rosie wants to say goodbye.
Goodbye. Bye. Subscribe. Join the fam bam.
She regrets this decision. Okay. I don't torture my cats.